Welcome to this Fundamentals video on Actionflows. Actionflows are used throughout our applications to provide its functionality, such as navigating between screens, saving data, connecting to external APIs, and more complex tasks such as fuzzy logic deduplication. They're typically wired to a button, but other event handlers such as double-clicking on a grid can also be connected. An Actionflow is made up of two parts, the connections and the action nodes. Connections define the data being passed into and out of an action flow, and the nodes define the actions performed in an action flow. Like all areas of PhixFlow, there's a toolbar that provides all of the tools necessary to produce your action flows. Action flows also have some additional options which we'll discuss during this video. We define an action flow's connection points separately from their action nodes. This separation allows us to reuse action flows. For example, we can create a single postcode validation action flow and use it in multiple places by connecting it to different data sources. The action nodes perform the same actions, but we're passing in different data. The places where the action flows are reused are referred to as the instances of the action flow. Action flows is a vast topic, and in this video we'll only cover the fundamentals by looking at the action flows we've already created, perhaps unknowingly, in the screens course. For more information on action flows, see the full action flow course, or have a look at the resources available in the context help. Let's start by opening the companies list screen that we created in the screens video. If you haven't completed this video, don't panic. I recommend you pause here and do so before proceeding. It can be accessed via the Learning Center, or click the screens button in the header and click the video link in the context help. When we created this screen, PhixFlow automatically created three action flows for us: Open Add, Open Edit, and Delete. We then added these to the grid and to the buttons on the screen. If you find that you've not done this, you can right-click on the grid and select Create CRUD Actions. These can then be dropped onto your buttons as seen in the screen building video. Let's have a look at how our action flows work, starting with the Open Add action. This opens the screen that allows us to add a new company. To access our action flow, we right-click on the Add button and click Display Action Flow. Here we have an action flow. The origin section tells us where this action flow is coming from. It displays the form name, the button name, and the event type. The left-hand side displays the connections that provide information into and out of the action flow. Every action flow must have an input to be able to run. This can just be a mouse click, or it can be data. The centre of the screen is the action flow canvas, and this is where we place and configure the nodes that perform the actions with their action flow. All instances of an action flow can be found by clicking the menu option. This action flow only has one instance. It is useful to know if there are multiple instances before editing, as alterations to an action flow impact all instances and we want to avoid any detrimental changes. We can also click Show Event Location to have PhixFlow open the location where the action flow is being called from, such as a button. Let's take a deeper look into the action flow. The connections. In this action flow, all we want to do is open up our screen to add a new company record. We don't need to pass any data, as we intend to insert a new record. Therefore, we connect this to the onClick event. This simply starts the action flow with the click event and passes it no data from the initiating screen. Incoming data is unique to each instance of the action flow. The connection points and nodes are shared. Action flows have three types of connections: input, lookup, and output. Input connections are the most common and are required in all action flows. They pass in records one by one to the action flow. Lookup connections are used to retrieve additional data when requested to by the action flow. These returns records as a set of records. We'll discuss this further in the complete course. Output connections return data from the action flow, for example returning data back to the calling screen. Connection points are the interfaces to the action flow where connections map their data. While connections are unique to each instance of the action flow, the connection points are constant across all instances. Connection points appear twice on an action flow, once here to signify the barrier between the incoming connections and the action flow, and a second time on the canvas. Finally, we have our first action node, and this is the open screen node. Action flows are made up of individual actions, or nodes, that are connected. In this instance, we've connected the connection point directly to the open screen node, which is designed to open a specified screen when it runs. You can see that it's configured to open up the edit screen we created in our screens video. This is a very simple action flow that is opening the screen. Let's now use the action to open the edit screen and look at inserting a record. Okay, so I'll close my Actionflow and lock my screen so I can interact with it. Here, if I click on the Add button, it will open up our form. And I first need to unlock it so I can now get to the Actionflow details. Connections. This time the Actionflow needs to use the data from the screen. So instead of connecting to the onClick event, we now connect it to the screen data. We refer to this data as the form data, and this is illustrated here. Only the primary key is mapped across, in our case the company ID, as this is all the save node needs to update an existing record. When we reuse an Actionflow, this is the only mapping that we'd need to set up. The mappings. Now we must map attributes from the connection points into the Actionflow itself. On each connection there is a mapping screen which can be accessed by clicking on it. On this screen the primary key has been mapped into the Actionflow, so the PhixFlow knows which record is being updated. We don't need to map any other attributes at this time, as PhixFlow can automatically handle this for us. Let's clear the mappings and remap. We can map attributes one by one using the drag and drop, or alternatively, if the attributes have the same name on both sides, we can use the Map by Name button. The Save action. The connection point is then connected directly to the Save node. Save nodes have a backing table and any or all attributes can be updated. The Save node has the Auto Save attributes ticked, which means it automatically saves attributes from our screen. If it finds any, it will save the value automatically. If we want to pick or choose which attributes to save, we can untick this option, but would have to manually add attributes using the attribute picker and map them in the same way that we did with the mapping of the company ID. Note that for save nodes to work, they always require the primary key of the backing table so they know which records to update. This save node has a type of auto insert update. This means that if the primary key, in this case our company ID, provides a blank value, it will create a new record. If it isn't blank, it will update the record with the corresponding value. This allows us to use the same action for both inserting a new record and updating an existing one. Finally, close screen after completion. In this action flow, this option is ticked because we want to close the form once we've done our save. Let's now try this out and add a new company. You can see that the new record has been added to our companies table successfully, but I want to amend the company name. To do this, I can simply double click on the record or click the edit button. Let's take a look at how this edit action flow works to update the record. The important thing here is to understand that the forms get their own data, so we only ever need to pass across the UID of the record we want to edit. Let's open up this action flow and take a look. Connections. The main difference here between this action flow and our first action flow is that this action flow requires the primary key, in our case the company ID, of the selected record, so it knows which record to display on the next screen. As I say, the next screen will retrieve that data using the ID. The grid is therefore the input for our action flow here, and the data set is set to selected. The only attribute we need to pass across is the company ID. Connection points. The company ID here is mapped across, and that's now going into our action flow. Now we go from the connection point to the open screen. The available items on the open screen node side of the mapping come from the screen itself, and these are the components that can support backing attributes such as form fields and dynamic text. In this example, we only need to pass across the company ID, and the form has been set up to filter based on this company ID, and that's automatically set up for us when we created the screen in our screens video. Let's double click on the record to show the action flow working. We can now update our name and any other details we want, and click the save button. We can use the same save action we did in the insert, but this time we're providing a company ID, so it will automatically perform an update rather than the insert. As you can see, the record has been updated successfully. To finish up this section on the automatically created action flows, let's take a look at the delete button. Now this works in very much the same way as our edit worked, and that we're passing across a selected record, except this time on our save node, We can see the type here has been moved from Auto Insert Update to the Delete option. Okay, let's have a look at editing some of these action flows so we can add some more information. To add information such as a timestamp or a calculated value, we typically use a Calculate action node. Here we'll work through an example where we update the title of the edit screen to state the name of the company that we're editing. We'll begin by opening the company's form screen and updating its title to be New Customer and save our changes. That means if we don't overwrite the title, it will always say New Customer. So let's do that first. Now we'll update the edit action flow to override this value so that when we're editing a company, its name will appear here. So we'll open up the edit action flow. I'll add a calculate node. Now drag this over the connection line as follows. If we want to use a value in the node, as we will here, we must map it. So for this particular action flow, we've only passed in the UID, but we'll also pass in the name now of the company, and then we'll use that in our calculate node. Now that's mapped into the connection point, so it's now available to our action flow. Next, if we want to use that in our calculate, we must map it into the calculate action as well. So here I click on the line in between, and I'll drag the company name into the details. So this is now available to our calculate action. So I'll create an output attribute. Now I tend to prefix these with PF, so I know it's an attribute I've added in the action flow. And in our expression, we can type in a literal string. So in quotes, we type editing, colon space, and we'll add to that the incoming company name. And as you can see here, the IntelliType has recognised what we're doing and it's offering us the attributes available. I'll save my changes. And now we have an extra attribute in our action flow. So if I want to use this, I now must pass this onto our screen. To do this, I'll click on the connecting line between the two action nodes. And my PF title, I'll move this across to be the title on our screen. Save my changes. And now, when we open up our edit form, what we'll see is it's passing across that name. Finally, let's have a look at some validation. If we want to make sure that the user always provides a name for the company that they're saving, we can add a validation to ensure this. There are other types of validation, and there's more information on validation if you have a look in the context help. So let's unlock our screen. Select the inner field for the field that we want to make mandatory, or if we want to apply some validation to it. Here I've chosen name, and if I scroll down, there's a validation section which we've seen previously. So here I've enabled validation, and I've also said that I only want to allow alphanumerics with the extended options. So this is things like brackets, forward slashes, and hyphens. Now to ensure this gets applied, what we must do is go and have a look at our save action flow. And in its properties, on the right hand side here, if we come down, we can see here that there's an option for perform validation before running. And what this will do is it will ensure that all validation is checked, including mandatory fields, and any validation that's been applied is run before the action flow is run. So I'll enable this and save my changes. So let's go back to our screen and we'll create a new record. We won't populate the company name. This will result in an error message and also an indication on the screen as to what the issue is. And here we can see the error message, letting us know that this is a mandatory field. Now if we do apply any validations, that will also appear if we mouse over the field where it's gone red, and it will tell us what the issue is, whether it hasn't met the character length or if there are certain characters it doesn't allow. So action flows is a vast topic, and we've only been able to cover the fundamentals in this video. If you'd like to know more about action flows, then go and have a look at the context help, and you'll find very specific how-to guides on certain things like adding validation, adding confirmations, passing data between screens like we've seen in this example, and also looking at how we use the drag and drop features in action flows. In the next session, we'll be looking at how we do large-scale analysis using our analysis models. To access this, click on the analysis option in the header, and you can click on the video link here, or you can access the course from our Learning Centre. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.